The storm had been raging for hours. Thunder cracked through the night sky, rattling the small provincial hospital where two cries echoed almost at the same time. In one room, Mrs. Arista, the elegant wife of a wealthy businessman, clutched her husband's hand as she delivered her first child. In another, Mrs. Sorry, the hard-working wife of a farmer, gave birth only minutes later. The power flickered, lights blinking on and off, casting uneasy shadows across the hospital walls. Nurses rushed in confusion, trying to care for both newborns at once. In the chaos of that stormy night, two baby boys were laid side by side in the nursery, swaddled in identical white blankets. Their names were not yet written, only temporary tags on their tiny wrists. One would be destined for a life of luxury, the other for hardship. But fate, or perhaps something darker, had other plans. When the power cut out completely for several minutes, the night nurse whispered nervously, stay calm, as she tried to keep both babies safe. She didn't realize, in the dim glow of a single emergency lamp, that the tags had slipped, switched between the two children. By dawn, the storm subsided. The babies were returned to their mothers, but not to the arms they were meant for. Years passed. The boy raised in the wealthy Arista family was named Rocca. He wore fine clothes, attended the best schools, and never worried about meals or bills. Yet something about him seemed out of place. He was quiet, often staring out the window at the horizon, as if longing for something beyond the mansion walls. Servants whispered that he sometimes woke in the middle of the night crying, calling out a name no one recognized. Meanwhile, the boy raised in the humble Sorry family was named Boggers. He grew up helping his parents work in the fields, fetching water, carrying firewood, tending to goats. Despite the poverty, he was cheerful, strong, and quick to laugh. But villagers often said, that boy has eyes too sharp, too proud for a farmer's son. As they grew into teenagers, their paths crossed by chance. At a school competition in the town hall, Rocca and Boggers faced each other for the first time. Rocca, in his crisp uniform, stood across from Boggers, whose shirt was patched and worn. But when their eyes met, both boys froze. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. The same sharp jawline, the same dark eyes, the same tilt of the nose. Strange, Rocca muttered under his breath. Boggers smirked, though unease prickled his spine. Feels like I've seen you before. Neither could explain the strange familiarity. That night, Boggers returned to his simple home. As he washed his face in the old cracked mirror, he saw something unusual. His reflection seemed delayed, moving just a fraction too late. Then, for a split second, he swore he saw another boy behind him in the reflection, dressed in expensive clothes, standing in a lavish room. Boggers spun around. No one was there. Far away, Rocca sat in his spacious bedroom, staring into his polished mirror. His reflection blinked when he didn't. Then, for just a moment, he saw himself in ragged clothes, holding a bucket of water. Both boys gasped, stepping back. The mirrors turned normal again. Am I seeing things? Whispered Rocca. Boggers, in another village, muttered the same words. Days later, a local legend surfaced during a family gathering at Boggers's village. An elder spoke. There was once a story. On nights of great storms, sometimes souls are switched. Not stolen, but misplaced. The wrong life taken, the right one hidden. And when the children grow old enough, the truth begins to call them back. Boggers laughed it off, but unease gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life was not truly his own. Meanwhile, Rocca's father noticed his son's growing restlessness. One evening, when Rocca mentioned the strange boy who looked exactly like him, his father went pale. He brushed it off quickly, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Stay away from that boy, Rocca. Promise me. Why? Rocca pressed. Because not everything in this world should be uncovered. Rocca didn't understand, but the fear in his father's eyes was real. The following week, the two boys crossed paths again, this time in a more chilling setting. During a festival, a blackout struck the town square. The crowd panicked, children crying, vendors scrambling. In the chaos, Rocker and Boggers found themselves standing side by side under the flickering streetlights. For a brief second, the world around them dimmed, and they were the only two who seemed frozen in time. Everyone else blurred, their movements slow like shadows underwater. Then, from the corner of their vision, a faint figure of a crying infant appeared, floating between them, its face obscured by light. The cries echoed in both their ears. Boggers clutched his chest. "Do you hear that?" Rocker nodded, trembling. "Yes. And I think it's us." The infant faded as the lights returned, the world resuming its normal pace. People laughed, the music restarted, but the boys stood frozen, haunted. From that night on, both could no longer ignore the truth. Their lives were tied together by something unnatural. The night after the festival, Boggers lay awake on his thin mattress, staring at the wooden ceiling. His mother, Mrs. Sorry, snored softly in the next room, exhausted from working in the fields. Yet Boggers could not sleep. The image of the crying infant between him and Rocker haunted his mind. Suddenly, the mirror on the wall of his room rattled as though touched by wind, though every window was closed. Boggers sat up sharply. His reflection wavered, as if water rippled across the glass. Then, in place of his face, he saw the crying infant again, its tiny hands reaching toward him. "No," Boggers whispered, stumbling back. But then the infant's reflection shifted into Rocker's face, pale and frightened. Rocker mouthed something, but no sound came through. Boggers shouted, "What do you want from me?" The mirror shattered, though no stone had touched it. Boggers's mother rushed into the room. "Boggers, what happened?" He swallowed hard, staring at the broken shards. I don't know, Boo. The mirror just broke." But deep inside, he knew the truth. Whatever this was, it was connected to Rocker. Meanwhile, Rocker was not faring any better. At midnight, he awoke to the sound of footsteps in his lavish bedroom. His chandelier flickered. He sat up in bed, whispering, "Who's there?" From the corner of the room, a shadow of a young boy emerged, barefoot, wearing tattered clothes. His face was hidden, but his posture, it was identical to Boggers. The shadow walked slowly toward Rocker's bed. Terrified, Rocker grabbed his bedside lamp, but when the light fully illuminated the figure, it vanished, leaving only cold air behind. The next morning, Rocker confronted his parents. "Father, Mother, I need answers. Who is that boy? Why does he look like me?" His father slammed the table, startling him. "Enough, Rocker. Stop asking questions that should remain buried." His mother, Mrs. Arista, gently placed her hand on Rocker's shoulder. Her voice trembled. "Sometimes, destiny chooses strange paths, my son. But don't dig where the ground is cursed." Rocker stared at her, confused and angry. "So you do know something?" Neither parent replied. The following week, their paths intertwined again. Boggers had been assigned to help clean the town library as part of a school program. Rocker arrived later that day, searching for old books for his history project. They bumped into each other among the dusty shelves. "Hey," Boggers muttered, awkward but defiant. Rocker crossed his arms. "We need to talk." They slipped into a quiet corner of the library, away from the watchful eyes of the librarian. "What happened at the festival? And the mirror in my room," Rocker whispered. "It's not normal." Boggers leaned closer. "Same thing happened to me. The mirror. It showed me you. And an infant." For the first time, silence bound them together, not as rivals, but as two halves of a mystery. Rocker pulled out an old newspaper clipping he had found in his father's drawer. "Look. This article is about the night we were born. A blackout hit the hospital. 2 boys, born minutes apart. No names given." Boggers's eyes widened. "That was the same night my mother told me about. The storm, the cries, the chaos." Rocker clenched his fist. "Boggers, I think we were switched." The words hung heavy in the air. Before Boggers could respond, the library lights flickered. Books slid off the shelves on their own, thudding onto the wooden floor. Both boys froze. Then, from between the aisles, a faint lullaby began to play, an old nursery rhyme neither had heard before. Step by step, they followed the sound, until they reached the darkest corner of the library basement. There, in the shadows, stood an old cradle. It rocked gently, though no one touched it. Rocker whispered, trembling. This can't be real." Boggers leaned closer. "Look." Inside the cradle was not a baby, but two small hospital wristbands, stained with age. The names had faded, but the dates matched theirs. As Boggers reached for them, the lullaby stopped. The cradle froze. Then, bang. The library door slammed shut upstairs. Both boys bolted, hearts pounding, clutching the wristbands. That night, Boggers confronted his mother. "Boo. Tell me the truth. Was I really your son?" Mrs. Sorry's face went pale. Tears welled in her eyes. "Boggers, you are my son because I raised you. But," she choked on her words, "the night you were born, there was confusion. I always wondered. Always feared." Boggers's hands shook. "So it's true. I don't belong here." Mrs. Sorry pulled him into her arms, sobbing. "You are mine, no matter what blood says. Don't let shadows take that from you." Meanwhile, Rocker sneaked into his father's office, determined to uncover the truth. He searched through drawers until he found a locked box. Inside was a hospital certificate, dated on the stormy night of their birth. 2 infants, unnamed. On the back of the paper was a note in his father's handwriting. "They must never know. If the truth is revealed, the curse will awaken." Rocker's blood ran cold. Curse? What curse? Suddenly, the office lights flickered. The reflection in the glass window shifted, showing Rocker and Boggers standing side by side, holding hands like brothers, but behind them loomed a dark figure cloaked in shadow. Rocker stumbled back, the paper slipping from his hands. He now knew one thing for certain. The truth was dangerous, but it was too late to turn back. The days after the discovery of the hospital wristbands were heavy with unease. Boggers and Rocker avoided each other at school, yet they felt an invisible pull. Each night, both dreamed the same dream: a dark corridor, the cries of an infant, and the shadow of a woman standing at the end, calling their names. Boggers woke one dawn drenched in sweat. "If this continues," he whispered, "I'll lose my mind." That afternoon, Rocker waited for him outside the rice fields. "We can't keep pretending nothing is happening," he said firmly. "The wristbands, the curse, it's all connected. We need to dig deeper." Boggers narrowed his eyes. "Why? So you can prove I stole your life? That I should have been the rich son, and you the poor one?" Rocker's voice softened. "I don't care about money. I want to know who I really am." For a moment, Boggers saw sincerity in Rocker's eyes, something beyond pride. Reluctantly, he nodded. "Fine. But if we do this, we do it together." Their first stop was the old hospital. Now abandoned, it stood like a ghostly skeleton at the edge of town. Windows shattered, vines crawling up its walls. Locals whispered it was haunted, but the boys were determined. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and forgotten pain. Rusted gurneys lined the halls, and torn curtains swayed in the stale breeze. "Creepy," Boggers muttered, clutching a flashlight. They reached the maternity ward. On the wall hung a faded chart of newborns from years ago. Some names were legible, others scratched away as if someone had deliberately erased them. Suddenly, Boggers froze. On the floor lay a torn page from a patient file, damp and fragile. Written on it, 2 infants. Confusion during blackout. Witness reported hearing lullaby though no nurse was present. Rocker's hand trembled. "It's real. The night we were born. Someone, something, was there." Before Boggers could reply, a cold wind swept through the corridor. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then died. From somewhere deep inside the ward, The faint lullaby returned, echoing eerily. Both boys turned pale. "Boggers," Rocker whispered. "We're not alone." They ran toward the exit, but the door slammed shut before they could reach it. In the dim light of the flashlight, shadows danced across the walls. Shadows shaped like infants crawling, laughing, crying. One shadow grew larger, stretching across the corridor, forming into the shape of a woman carrying a baby. Her face was hidden, her voice a whisper. "Return what was taken, or both will suffer." The cradle's lullaby grew louder, filling every corner. Boggers dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. "Stop it, please." Rocker grabbed his arm. "We have to get out, now." They pushed against the locked door until finally it burst open. Both stumbled outside, gasping for breath, the hospital looming behind them like a living nightmare. That night, Boggers couldn't eat. His mother noticed his pale face. "Boggers, are you sick?" He forced a smile. "No, Boo. Just tired." But inside, he burned with questions. Across town, Rocker confronted his father again. He slammed the torn patient file onto the table. "Enough lies. Who was that woman? What curse are you hiding from me?" His father's eyes hardened. "You think the truth will set you free? No, Rocker. The truth will bind you to something far worse." Mrs. Arista whispered, tears in her eyes. "Your life was switched that night. The spirits knew. That is why they linger. They will not rest until balance is restored." Rocker's voice cracked. "Balance? You mean one of us has to give up his life?" Silence. The answer was clear. The next day, Rocker met Boggers at the library again. He looked broken, but determined. "My parents confirmed it. We were switched. And worse. There's a curse tied to it." Boggers clenched his fists. "So what now? We just accept it. Let ghosts decide our fate." Rocker looked at him, his eyes sharp. "No. We fight it. But to do that, we need to uncover the full story. Who that woman is, why the curse exists." Together, they searched through old town records. Finally, Boggers found an entry about a nurse named Ratner who had mysteriously disappeared on the same night they were born. Locals believed she was taken by spirits after offending the balance. Rocker whispered, horrified. "She must be the shadow we saw. The one carrying the baby." Boggers's chest tightened. "If she wants balance, maybe she's the one who switched us." That evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, both boys walked back home with the heavy truth in their hearts. But just before they parted, Rocker said something that sent chills through Boggers. "What if balance means one of us must return to the life we were meant for?" Boggers frowned. "And the other?" Rocker's expression darkened. "The other might not survive." The air between them grew cold. Somewhere in the distance, the faint lullaby played again. Soft, haunting, inevitable. The next few days felt unbearable. Boggers and Rocker could no longer live normally. Every night, the same lullaby haunted them, sometimes accompanied by the faint cries of babies echoing in their rooms. One evening, Boggers found scratches on his mirror, 3 claw-like marks that hadn't been there before. In the reflection, for just a second, he swore he saw a boy identical to himself, staring back with hollow eyes. He stumbled back in fear. "Who are you?" he whispered. The reflection didn't answer, only smiled before vanishing. The next morning, Rocker arrived at Boggers's house, pale and sleepless. "I saw her again," Rocker said, his voice shaking. "The woman. She was at my window, holding a baby wrapped in blood-stained cloth." Boggers swallowed hard. "We can't run anymore. We have to face her." Rocker nodded. "But how? She's not human anymore." Boggers thought for a long moment. "Then maybe we need help from someone who understands both worlds." That night, they went to see Mbajoyo, the oldest shaman in their village. His house smelled of incense, the walls covered in old scrolls and talismans. The shaman listened quietly as the boys explained everything. The hospital, the lullaby, the curse, and the ghostly nurse Ratna. When they finished, Bar Joyo's wrinkled hands trembled. "You two are bound by a fate written in blood," he whispered. "That night, when the blackout happened, Nurse Ratna did not switch you by mistake. She was guided by spirits of the river." "Why?" Boggers asked. Bar Joyo's eyes were grave. "Because the wealthy family had promised their firstborn to the spirits in exchange for fortune. But when you were born, Boggers, fate interfered. Ratna, out of pity, placed you in the poor family's arms, hoping to trick the curse. But such bargains cannot be cheated. Now the spirits demand balance." Rocca's voice cracked. "So one of us must return. Or pay the price." The shaman nodded slowly. "If balance is not restored, both of you will be claimed." That night, neither boy could sleep. Boggers stared at the ceiling, the words echoing in his mind. "If balance is not restored, both of you will be claimed." In his chest, a storm brewed. Why me? Why was I the one given to a poor family? Why was I spared? Do I even deserve this life? Across town, Rocca sat alone in the grand living room of the mansion. The chandeliers glittered, but he felt emptier than ever. What's the point of all this wealth, if it was never mine to begin with? For the first time, both boys felt the weight of a truth too cruel to bear. Neither truly belonged where they were. The next evening, Boggers found a note slipped under his door. In neat handwriting, it read, "Meet me at the abandoned hospital. Midnight. Alone." There was no name, but he knew it was from Rocca. At midnight, the hospital loomed darker than before. Boggers entered cautiously, flashlight trembling in his hand. In the maternity ward, he found Rocca waiting, his face pale but resolute. "I've decided," Rocca said. "The curse wants balance. Then I'll return to the poor life, and you can take my place as the true heir." Boggers froze. "No. That's insane. You've lived that life for 17 years. You can't just..." Rocca interrupted, voice breaking. "Boggers, I don't belong in that mansion. Every time I sit at that dinner table, I feel like an intruder. Maybe this is how it's supposed to be." Before Boggers could respond, the air grew icy. The lullaby drifted through the ward, louder than ever. Then she appeared. Nurse Ratna. Her shadowy figure materialized, carrying the same infant wrapped in blood-stained cloth. Her hollow eyes fixed on them. "Choose," she whispered, her voice like broken glass. "Or both shall perish." The boys' flashlights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed them whole. Boggers felt his heart pound like a drum. "No, you can't decide our fate," he shouted at the apparition. "We didn't ask for this." But Nurse Ratna only raised her hand, and the walls of the ward melted into visions. 2 cradles, 2 crying babies, and a pair of desperate parents. One rich, one poor. And her own hands, switching the infants. "Balance," she repeated. "Balance must return." Rocca stepped forward, trembling. "If it's me you want, take me. Leave Boggers alone." Boggers grabbed his arm. "No, you're not sacrificing yourself." Their voices echoed through the collapsing ward. The visions grew sharper. The crying infants turned into shadowy figures. 2 boys, mirrors of Boggers and Rocca themselves, pale and transparent. Boggers gasped. "They're us." The shadows smiled, their mouths opening in unison. One must return. One must vanish. At that moment, Boggers felt a surge of defiance. He looked straight at the apparition. "No, I won't let you decide. We'll decide our own fate." For a moment, everything went still. Nurse Ratna tilted her head, as if curious. Then, with a voice that shook the ward, she whispered, "Then prove it." The shadows lunged forward, merging with Boggers and Rocca, plunging them into darkness. The world around Boggers and Rocca dissolved into a whirl of shadows. They no longer stood in the hospital but in a liminal space, an endless hallway lined with mirrors on both sides. Each mirror reflected not just their faces, but distorted versions of themselves. One rich, one poor, one alive, one pale and ghost-like. The lullaby continued, louder now, vibrating in their bones. Nurse Ratner appeared at the end of the hallway, holding the bundle in her arms. The baby inside cried softly, the sound breaking the silence like glass. "You must choose," she whispered. "Only one life will remain as it is. The other must return to the river spirits." Boggers's breath caught. Return means death? Ratner's hollow eyes glowed faintly. Not death. Transformation. One of you will cease to exist in this world, but live forever as part of the river's current. Rocker clenched his fists. So we're just sacrifices in someone else's bargain? Ratner tilted her head. That bargain was sealed before your birth. Balance demands fulfillment. The mirrors began to rattle violently. From within them stepped the shadow children, ghostly doubles of Boggers and Rocker. Their faces were expressionless, their movements jerky, but their voices were chillingly familiar. "Choose quickly," they said in unison, "or the river will choose for you." The air grew heavy, pressing on Boggers's chest. He turned to Rocker, eyes filled with panic. "We can't let them decide. There has to be another way." But Rocker shook his head. "No, Boggers. Maybe I was never meant to live your life. Maybe this was always your destiny." He stepped forward toward Nurse Ratner. "Take me." Boggers grabbed his arm desperately. "Stop. Don't do this. I don't care about destiny. I care about you." The shadows hissed. The mirrors cracked. The lullaby grew deafening. Suddenly, Boggers remembered Mba Joyo's words. Such bargains cannot be cheated. But sometimes, they can be rewritten. His eyes widened. Rewritten. "Wait!" Boggers shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If this is about balance, then we can offer something else." Nurse Ratner paused, her figure flickering. "What do you offer, child?" Boggers's hands shook, but his voice was steady. "We both stay. But in exchange, we bind ourselves to protect the balance of this village. We carry the curse, not as victims, but as guardians." Rocker looked at him in shock. "Boggers, what are you saying?" Boggers turned to him. "If we both vanish, it ends here. But if we live, maybe we can turn this curse into something that saves others. We rewrite the bargain." The hallway went silent. The shadows froze. Nurse Ratner's hollow gaze softened, just for a moment. "Guardians," she whispered, as though testing the word. The mirrors began to mend themselves, their cracks sealing with a sound like breaking ice in reverse. The shadow children faded, leaving only Boggers and Rocker standing side by side. Ratner cradled the baby closer, her voice trembling. "This was never what I wanted. I only tried to save you. But in doing so, I doomed you both." A single tear rolled down her hollow cheek. Then, with a final nod, she whispered, "So be it. The bargain is rewritten." The baby's cry turned into silence. The lullaby faded. The hallway dissolved into light. Boggers gasped and opened his eyes. He was back in the hospital ward, only it was morning now, sunlight streaming through broken windows. Rocker lay beside him, breathing heavily but alive. They looked at each other, both stunned. "Are we still here?" Rocker whispered. Boggers nodded slowly. "Yeah, we made it." But when they stood, they noticed something strange. Both of their reflections in the cracked window shimmered faintly, as if their bodies carried a thin veil of the otherworld. Their eyes glowed for a split second, then returned to normal. They weren't just Boggers and Rocker anymore. They were something more. Weeks passed. The hauntings stopped. No more lullabies, no more cries. The mansion felt warmer, and even Boggers's old house seemed free of shadows. But Boggers and Rocker knew the truth. Sometimes, when they looked into mirrors, They saw faint figures watching them. Sometimes, by the river, they felt whispers in the wind. They were no longer ordinary boys. They had become keepers of balance, the price of rewriting fate. One evening, as the sun set, Rocker turned to Boggers. "You know, maybe we weren't switched by accident. Maybe this was always meant to happen." Boggers smiled faintly. "Yeah, we're brothers now. Not by blood, but by curse." The wind blew softly, carrying a faint sound, a lullaby, distant and gentle. Not threatening, not haunting. Almost protective. The boys looked at each other, and for the first time since the truth was revealed, they felt peace. The curse was no longer their doom. It was their legacy.